7, we're going to be solving a quadratic using the quadratic formula. So this is really cool, you guys, something really neat. The quadratic formula, these mathematicians started solving all these different types of quadratics. And they came up with this formula and proved it to be true. So what happened here was they took and they were able to figure out a formula to be able to solve any quadratic equation. No matter what, anytime, no matter what kind of quadratic, you can always solve it using the quadratic formula. So once you know the quadratic formula, you can solve any quadratic I give to you. But there are two things that have to be true about the quadratic. First of all, it has to be in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c, and it has to be set equal to 0. Now the cool thing is, if you're missing bx or missing c, you can still use the quadratic formula. You'll just put in a 0 for b or a 0 for c. But it has to be set equal to 0. So once again, the quadratic formula always works, you guys, every single time. No matter what, you can use it. But your quadratic does have to be in standard form. So let's say it was in vertex form. I just solved like we learned yesterday, but let's say you forgot. You could put it in standard form, you know, by multiplying it out like what we practiced yesterday and use the quadratic formula. That's the hard way of doing it, but anyways. So here's the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b. I like to say the opposite of b. So x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared. Notice how I put it in parentheses. B squared minus 4 times a times c. And notice that's all under the square root. And that's all over 2 times a. So a couple things to notice about the quadratic formula. First of all, this is in parentheses. B squared is in parentheses. Anytime we're multiplying something out, we want to put it in parentheses. So I did minus 4 times a times c. I put a and c in parentheses. And that's all over 2 times a. Now here's a common error. Students, when they first see the quadratic formula, will do this. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And they'll only put this part over 2a. Well, that's not true. It's all over, the whole top is all over 2a. So do you understand that? So don't just do a part of it over 2a. It's not just this piece over 2a. It's all over 2a. Is everybody comfortable with that? Now here's a song that will help you never forget this. You'll know it for the rest of your life. I'll sing it first, and we'll sing it together. It's To Pop Goes the Weasel. If you've all heard that song, right? Pop goes the weasel. Oh, well then you have had a sad childhood. Okay, so this is how it goes. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so that's just a song that even I refer to sometimes to remember the quadratic formula. So let's all sing it together. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. One more time. I promise that song will come in handy. It's so much easier than memorizing it. Okay? X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so you can always use that. Yes.
So, what, like, does it mean, like, that there will be 2 answers?
Yes, and there are always going to be 2 answers with quadratics, right?
So you all have to solve for negative and positive?
No, we already have the plus and minus in the formula, so they've accounted for the plus and minus.
Oh, okay.
So guys, we're literally taking A, B, and C, plugging it in. That's all we have to do. There's our answer. Here's the trick. 9 out of 10 students can't do the quadratic formula correctly. It's the easiest method, but yet students aren't careful enough. Students are kind of careless. They're not particular when typing things in with parentheses. I'm asking you to be careful today and particular and show your work. It's like impossible if you get the wrong answer, if you didn't show work, for me to tell you what you did wrong. If you show your work, I can usually say, oh, you know what, you messed up right there. Show your work. So here we go. So when I tell you to do little things, do them, please, because it's for your benefit. Okay, I've been teaching a while now. I know what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so first of all, number 1, it says solve using the quadratic formula. So first step, make sure it's set equal to 0. It is, and it's in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c. If you don't have it in standard form, your a, b, and c will be way off. Totally different answer. So now I'm going to have you write out a is 7, b is 8, and c is 1. So now we're just going to plug it into the formula. So we have our song, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now we're literally plugging in those values and calculating. The tricky part is not making any errors anywhere. So we get x is equal to the opposite of b. Wouldn't that be negative 8?
Yes.
We're going to always show our work. Negative 8 plus or minus, or I can't help you. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Let's use parentheses. So we're doing 8 squared. Does everybody see where I'm putting in b squared?
Yes.
Minus 4 times a. A is 7 times c. C was positive 1. And that's all over 2 times 8. And once again, a was 7. So now we're just going to simplify, but you've got to simplify correctly. The quadratic formula in general is not hard. It's simplifying it correctly that's hard. So I'm going to write it out again. X is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root. I'm not going to type in the square root of that, because if you get a decimal, then you're like messed up. So here we go. I'm only going to calculate this part so I can show my work. So I'm typing it in with parentheses exactly as shown, with parentheses on everything. So type it in, parentheses, 8 squared minus 4. You should all practice typing it in. Minus 4 times 7 times 1.
36.
Positive 36. And that's all over 2 times 7, which is 14. Is everybody comfortable up to here? Now, this is every single time we always go off to the side and say, okay, do I know what the square root of 36 is? It's 6, right? Square root of 36 is 6, yeah.
So when we're solving for that, you don't put a square root, you just...
No, because we, oftentimes we're going to get decimals, and so that's why we actually want to know what was under the square root, because we might have to break it down by hand. Does that make sense? Good question. So yeah, you won't type in the square root part. But now we will calculate the square root of what was underneath. That is 6. So we have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 6. Isn't the square root of 36 6? Don't write the square root of 6. It's not. The square root of 36 is 6. Okay, and that's all over 14. So now we're going to just say, okay, so I can split this up. What I really have is x is equal to negative 8 plus 6. So negative 8 plus 6 all over 14. And I also have x is equal to negative 8 minus 6. You see what I'm doing here?
Yes.
All over 14. Then you'll see, does that simplify? Well, let's look. Add up on top. Do negative 8 plus 6. So we really have negative 2 over 14, which is negative 1/7. There's one of our x values. There's one of our solutions, because it was x is equal to negative 1/7. And then in this one, we'll do the same thing. So negative 8 minus 6. So we really have negative 14, sorry, that's an equal sign, negative 14 on top over 14, which is equal to negative 1. Look, there's our two x values. So it's easy, but yet hard, because it really is, it all comes down to being very particular in how you go through this. Yes?
Will there ever be a case where both x's will be except
Yes, there will be. Mm-hmm.
So is there like a trick in order to like get their hand to that, or is there not?
No, it'll be the same process. And we'll get more into, yeah. Okay, let's do another one. Do you have questions? Not hard, but yet really hard. Like I said, 9 out of 10 students can sit and do it with me. I go start letting them work, they bomb it. Please don't do that. So just show your work like I did. Okay, so here we go. So solve using the quadratic formula. I'm doing number 2. First things first, it has to be in standard form and set equal to 0. It's not equal to 0, so I'm going to add 98 to both sides. So we have 2w squared minus 28w plus 98 is equal to 0. You're going to get your A, B's, and C's wrong if it's not in standard form. Okay, highest degree to lowest degree. We're good. Our A is 2. Our B is negative 28. And our C is 98. If you even mess up right here at the beginning with a negative, you're done. The whole problem's wrong. So everybody, every little thing counts with the quadratic formula. All right, so we have the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And let's plug it in. Correctly, particularly not making any errors. So x equals the opposite of b. So x equals the opposite of negative 28, which would be positive 28.
Yes.
Plus or minus the square root of b squared, needs to be in parentheses, negative 28 squared minus 4 times a. A is 2 times c. C is 98. And then that's all over 2 times a, which is 2 times a is 2. Questions before we keep simplifying? Now, take my suggestion. Do not take the square root of your calculator and type that in. We're going to have imaginary solutions later on. We're going to have things like you have to just be able to calculate what's underneath, and then we'll do it by hand if necessary. So don't type in the square root part, but let's type this piece into our calculator. So we have parentheses. If you don't type it in with parentheses exactly as shown, you're not going to get the right answer. 4 times 2 times 98. 0. Very good. So we have the square root of 0. And that's all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So then you take in your calculator the square root of 0, which is 0, you guys. So really we have x is equal to 28 plus and minus the square root of 0 was 0, all over 4. So Tyler, this is going to be one of those problems you were asking about. So now we'll split it up, right, if we need. So x is equal to 28 plus 0 over 4. And we have x is equal to 28 minus 0 over 4. So 28 plus 0, isn't that just 28 over 4? Which is, right? And then isn't 28 minus 0 just 28? So we have 28 over 4, which is 7. So we have x is equal to 7, x is equal to 7. So guess what? Yeah.
So could you just put x equals to 7?
Nope, you would want to write it twice. If we were going to say this in the correct terms, we would say x is equal to 7 with a multiplicity of 2, because that means it happens twice. Remember how we talked about that, the bouncing?
Yeah.
On the first day of quadratics, when it bounced on the x-axis, only touched down once, but there's always 2 answers, right? It's because it's bouncing at 7. So it's going ding ding. Does that make sense? So it's actually, you need to write out x is equal to 7 twice, or say x is equal to 7 with a multiplicity of 2, but that's more secondary 3 level, yeah.
So why couldn't you just put x squared equals 7, meaning there are 2 x's that equal 7?
Because that's not true. X squared is not equal to 7, or else this x would be the square root of 7.
Oh.
Yeah, good questions. Okay, let's do another one. Number 8, then I'm just going to let you go. It really just takes practice and typing it into your calculator correctly, not making any errors. So number 8, let's, first of all, it has to be in standard form to use the quadratic formula. It has to be equal to 0. So first of all, it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. So negative 3p squared plus 17p minus 20 is equal to 0. And by the way, I'm thinking up here that I'm making perfect sense because nobody's asking anything. Do I need to slow down? Do I need to... Okay, just making sure. Okay, so now I like to go through and say, okay, my a value, do not make any errors here, or else your whole thing's wrong. You did all that work for nothing. A is negative 3. B is positive 17. C is negative 28.
Yeah.
28, you're right. It should have been 20. So that would have been bad news. So negative 20 would have been really bad news. Why do you call that? So then you say, okay, I'm going to solve by the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug it in. So we have x is equal to the opposite of b. So won't that be negative 17? Plus and minus the square root of b squared, parentheses, 17 squared minus 4 times a. A is negative 3. Times c. C is negative 20. We need parentheses. That's all over 2 times a. A was negative 3. Questions before I continue to simplify? So we have x is equal to negative 17 plus or minus the square root. Don't take the square root, just type this part into your calculator. Because in a later day we're going to have imaginary solutions. Not today, but minus 4 times. Everyone should practice typing it in.
49.
Yes, very good. We have 49 under here, and that's all over 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, right? 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Oh, yeah. So then this is where we go off to the side and say, okay, what is the square root of 49? Try typing it in your calculator. If it comes out even, okay, it's 7. Very good. So really we have x is equal to negative 17 plus or minus 7 all over negative 6. Is everybody comfortable up to here? Okay. So then I split it up and say, okay, so I have x is equal to negative 17 plus 7 over negative 6. I have x is equal to negative 17 minus 7 over negative 6. And then simplify it on top. Well, up here, negative 17 plus 7 is negative 10 over negative 6. Type it into your calculator. Negative 10. Yep, you're right. Positive 5/3. So we have, I'm going to write it down here. X is equal to 5/3. And then over here, negative 17 minus 7 is negative 24 over negative 6, which is positive 4. So we also have x is equal to positive 4. There's our two solutions. Quadratic formula works every day. All day, every day, for any quadratic you run across, as long as you can type it in correctly. This works for imaginary solutions. This works for irrational solutions. Today they're all going to come out quite nicely. But we'll get to some that are imaginary and irrational next couple days. All right, ready to practice. So do problems 1 through 9. Once again, with quadratic formula, precision is everything. Don't start skipping steps because you think you're good now and you're better than that and I'm going to skip steps. You're going to start getting them wrong and I won't be able to help you. Beautiful answers. So you're going to have irrational answers, meaning can't be written as a fraction. So let's do, we saw some of those yesterday. Let's do number 10 together, you guys. So once again, solve these in the quadratic formula. You have to first make sure it's in standard form and set equal to 0. My a value is 1, my b value is negative 2, my c value is negative 2. X equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, plugging it in. Here, oh, I need those a, b, and c values. Okay, so plugging it in, the opposite of b would be positive 2. So we have x equals positive 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 2, and that's all over 2 times a, 2 times 1. So we have x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root. I'm going to only calculate in my calculator this part. So type it in. 12. I believe that's right. Yes, good. So if you do that, so everybody, we're seeing something a little bit more intense here. So we have the square root of 12 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. What's the square root of, so this is where we go off to the side. Say, I'm going to calculate the square root of 12. Type it into your calculator, you get a decimal. Not acceptable. So you have to go back and say, well, I know how to break down the square root of 12 by hand. So that's 4 times 3, right? 4 breaks down into 2 times 2. With square roots, we're pulling out groups of. So we're going to pull out a 2. Do not pull out 4, right? We're pulling out a 2 because technically we're taking the square root of 4, which is 2. So we pull out a 2 for those two 2's. Left underneath is a 3. So we have 2 square roots of 3. So you guys, this simplified to be 2 square roots of 3. Sorry, this simplified to be 2 square roots of 3. So instead of writing the square root of 12, we just simplified the square root of 12. It's 2 square roots of 3. Is everybody so good so far? So I'm going to write that in. So what I have is x is equal to 2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 3 all over 2. Does everybody see that? Now here's the thing. Only if, and this is a huge only if all 3 things divide by something can you simplify. So if just these 2 simplify, not good enough. If just these 2 simplify, not good enough. And the other thing, you never simplify under the root with something that's not under the root. So look, does 2, 2, and 2 all simplify? They all divide by 2, right? So if I divide this by 2, it's a 1. If I divide this by 2, it's a 1. Always write in your ones because people start leaving places as zeros instead. 2 divides by 2 and becomes a 1. So we really have x is equal to 1 plus or minus 1 square roots of 3 all over 1. Anything divided by 1 is just itself, right? Right? Right. So we really have x is equal to 1 plus and minus. Do I need to write 1 square root of 3? No, right? 1 times the square root of 3. Isn't that just the square root of 3? Yes. So I have the square root of 3. So there's our 2 answers. X is equal to 1 plus the square root of 3, which we saw answers like that yesterday, and x is equal to 1 minus the square root of 3. There's our 2 answers. These are irrational, meaning they can't be written as fractions, so we write them like this, yeah.
Do you want us to split them up, or can we just leave it as 1 plus or minus?
I'm kind of going to be a stickler right now and make you split them up. Okay. Because people forget that that's 2 solutions, and they don't understand what it means. Okay, do you need one more like that? Okay. So if not, you can go on. If so, I'm doing number 12. So if not, feel free to go. If you need one more, I'm going to do number 12 on the board. And then...
Wait, is that last one?
Yeah. So number 12 is what I'm doing here. So we have this, but it's got to be set equal to 0, so I'm going to add 2, first step. So we have negative z squared minus 4z plus 2 is equal to 0. And then we can start our a, b, and c values. So a in this one is negative 1. There's always a 1 there. B is negative 4. And c is positive 2. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, plugging it in. We would plug in, so opposite of b would be positive 4 plus or minus the square root of parentheses, negative 4 squared minus 4 times a is negative 1, times c is 2, and it's all over 2 times negative 1. Simplifying it, we'll have x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root. I'm going to take my calculator and calculate that. And if you do it correctly, you get 24. Very good. So we have 24, the square root of 24, all over 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. So this is where you go off to the side and say, what's the square root of 24? You try it in your calculator. It's a decimal, so we have to break it down by hand. 24 breaks down into 6 times 4. 6 breaks down into 3 times 2. 4 breaks down into 2 times 2. Pulling out groups of 2 because it's a square root. So we're pulling out a 2. Can't pull out a 3, can't pull out a 2. So those are going to stay underneath. We're pulling out a 2 for those two 2's. So we pulled out a 2, and left underneath was a 3 and a 2. So really left underneath was 6. So we have 2 square roots of 6. Comfortable with that?
Yes.
So instead of this, we just simplify that to be 2 square roots of 6. So I'm replacing it. X is equal to 4 plus and minus 2 square roots of 6 all over 2. Then once again, only if all three things can divide by something, can you simplify it? Well, they all divide by 2. So 2 divides by 2 and becomes a...
Yeah, -2, not +2.
Thank you. So 2 divides by, -2 divides by 2 and becomes -1. Thanks for that fix. 4 divides by 2 and becomes a 2. 2 divides by 2 and becomes a... We never divide something under a radical with something that's not. So 6 divides by 2, yeah, but it's under a root. Leave it alone. Does that make sense, everybody?
Negative 2?
What?
Are we doing negative? Divided by negative?
I just divided by positive 2.
Oh.
So I still have a -1 on bottom. Okay. So on top, I have x is equal to 2 plus and minus 1 square roots of 6, which I'm just going to write as the square root of 6, and that's all over -1. So yeah, now you'll say, okay, I'm going to split it up. X is equal to, so x is equal to 2 plus the square root of 6 all over -1. X is equal to 2 minus the square root of 6 all over -1. Now this would not be how I'd write the answer, because we can divide by -1, right?
Right.
So what's 2 divided by -1?
Negative 2.
-2. What's positive square roots of 6 divided by -1? Simply negative square roots of 6. This would be the most simplified answer. I'd make you go that far. And then over here, 2 divided by -1 is, once again, -2. And then a negative square root of 6 divided by -1 becomes positive square roots of 6. So we still have our answers here. So it's just it comes all down to simplifying correctly. So you have 10 minutes to practice and check your answers with me. So this is what's due up to tomorrow, up through 15. Just up through, don't do these, up through 15. So 1 through 15 needs to be done by tomorrow. 10 minutes to practice a few of those. I start practicing 10 through 15. So you can check your answers with me.